Good afternoon, everybody. We are in the Sungrown Cannabis Stories from the Fields. It's Sativa 3 on the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium. Today we're going to be talking about how the Emerald Triangle is home to the original U.S. cannabis sun-grown farmers. What started as an underground industry has grown into a challenging regulated market in California. We'll hear from various multi-generational and sun-grown farmers from this region as they share their stories of how they shipped to legal markets and has affected their realities. So today we have Johnny Casale from Huckleberry Hill Farms, Dan Stein from Bryceland Forest Farm, and Zach Carson from Imaginal. And let's begin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ann. And yeah, my name is Zach, and it's a pleasure to welcome some good friends of mine, Johnny Casale, Daniel Stein. Both, thank you so much for joining us in the midst of your harvest up in the Emerald Triangle, to take a little time out of your day and share a bit about you guys and your farms and what you're all doing. So why don't we just jump in? We'll start with a little introductions. Johnny and Daniel, maybe just, who you are, where your farm is, what you're growing, and what your values really are in what you do.
Sure. You want to go first, Dan, or you want me to?
Go for it, Johnny.
Okay. Right on. You look pretty good too, actually. Little beard, but nice. Yeah, I'm a second generation cannabis farmer in southern Humboldt County, and I've living on the same piece of property for the last 45 years. This was my parents' property, and they eventually started commercial fishing around the world and left when I was about 20 years old, and I just never left home. And now, unfortunately, they have passed on, and I'm still doing the same thing that I used to do with my mother since I was 10 years old. So the journey's been incredible. It would take months to really share with you the emotional ups and downs in the whole journey that most of us that live here in the Emerald Triangle have gone through. But it's an amazing story, and we're really determined to share that with the audience here today and with the consumer that is ultimately, at the end of the day, consuming our product, which we believe is some of the best stuff in the world. Yeah, there's a lot more, but I'll let Daniel introduce himself now.
Hey, thanks, Johnny. I'm Daniel Stein, and as you can tell, I'm so much in the midst of harvest, I don't have time for a shave and a haircut, but onward and we keep going. So I am a farmer here in southern Humboldt in the heart of the Emerald Triangle, also second generation farmer. I'm on a homestead that was originally developed by my parents back in the mid to late 70s. I then grew up primarily in Hawaii as my parents had moved on from Humboldt, seeking careers and other goals in life. I returned to our homestead about 20 years ago, have been fixing it up. I've been growing cannabis for 25 years, starting crawling around in the bushes behind my house in Hawaii. And here on our farm, where myself and my wife Taylor, we grow a wide range of things. Cannabis is a small portion of what our homestead produces. We also grow mixed vegetables for market. We sell at a couple local farmers markets, to restaurants, and provide a farm share through community supported agriculture locally. And we do this here on the homestead with the goal of sustainability, regeneration, and community empowerment in mind. There's, of course, like Johnny said, there's so much to a story of how we get to where we are and what we're up to, but that's the bare bones of it for us.
Yeah, thank you both of you. And I want to dive into some of those stories because both of you in my mind are just exemplary humans, but exemplary farmers and exemplary stewards of both the land and the sun-grown cannabis industry. You know, a little transparency for all those in attendance. I'd rather smoke sun-grown weed than indoor weed, and for me, it's not just about how I feel when I smoke that and the energy that I get from that, but it's because I've been fortunate enough to meet people like this that we're talking to in my life and really have that direct relationship with the farmer. So both of you mentioned a little bit about how the story is way too long to tell about both of you, but this is the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium. And so maybe you guys can talk about, as it pertains to your ethos and your farming, what that word sustainability means to you and how that has been a journey from your family history to now, how that word has sort of shifted and if it's shifted your behavior and in your practice of farming.
Yeah, I'll go first, Daniel. You know, this journey for me started when I was 10 years old, following my mother around, and it's different than most other farmers that I know, and it's really made me who I am today. And I'll keep it kind of short, Zach, because it can drag on. But when I was 20 years old, I ended up, I was pretty naive. Me and my best friend, we didn't know there was a difference between state and federal law. We were just two dumb young kids that loved to surf and live a pretty free type lifestyle. And, since I was 10 years old, following my mother around, we noticed helicopters in the air, and they were doing aerial surveillance and eradicating marijuana with ground troops and stuff. And, my mother taught me the basics of being sustainable. We had solar panels. We collected mulch from underneath the bushes and put them in our vegetable beds and our cannabis beds. And to me, a tomato plant was the exact same thing as a cannabis plant was. And yeah, there was people getting eradicated, but those were the larger grows. And it wasn't really until my parents left when I was 20 that my technique for growing had to change, and we didn't grow out in the open anymore. We didn't try to grow 5-pound plants. We were trying to grow plants that were 1-ounce plants. And so to make up for the difference, we were growing underneath the trees, in the mulch, and trying to get an ounce plant. And unfortunately, I got busted by the federal government and went to court for 4 years. And at the end of those 4 years, the judge handed down a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years. And I did 8 out of those 10 years in federal prison and had 5 years probation. So this has been a 17-year long journey with this cannabis plant for me. And it's really unforgettable now that I'm permitted with the county and permitted with the state. But to bring it back to sustainability, I really have learned most of my farming sustainability practices through farms like Daniel, like Bryceland Forest Farms. Really, when it comes to regenerative farming, there's different degrees, in my opinion, to that. And even though we would all love to do that, some of the farms have the experience and have the capability of doing that more so than others. But really, that's what drives me at the end of the day. And I learned most of my regenerative type practices from Bryceland Forest Farms through Daniel and Taylor, whether or not he knows that or not, because they are the most inspiring farm, them and Happy Days to me. If I have a hero farm, to me, they're it. And so my journey in this farm doesn't really pertain to just sustainability. It really has a purpose in life now, is making a difference in people's lives and really telling the story of the Emerald Triangle and the journey that we all went through. And what I went through really could have happened to any one of my friends and any one of these farms that you're seeing and talking to today. So that's part of the story.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm going to ask you guys a little bit more beyond the agricultural sustainability. We're going to get into that. So thank you for bringing all that up, Johnny. And you have had a hell of a story. And we'll talk a little bit more. Daniel, how about you as it relates to sort of getting on your land and some of the ethos through your cannabis or your vegetables, some of the practices that are really setting you apart and really bringing you back to the land in the best possible way?
Well, first, thank you, Johnny. That means a lot to me coming from you that you find inspiration through our farm. And I pretty regularly find inspiration with your sustainability through how hard this process has been, and you're staying open-hearted and positive through a like very negative time in the world and the industry. So it means a
Thank
lot
you.
to me coming from you. You know, my path to the idea of sustainability and the practices really would start with my parents, who were both folks that grew up in New York City, and during the late 60s, early 70s, were part of the Back to the Land movement, where they were aware that culture as it was taking place was an unsustainable thing and it wasn't working for everybody. And they made their way out here to the country to try to create something different, to try to homestead. And for both of them, it was a brief time, and they left to pursue other goals. And I ended up growing up primarily in Hawaii. I during my high school time, which is the early 90s, I participated in a program where we actually built a solar powered car and drove it across the country, being the first high school to do that. And one of my jobs during that was to interface with media. Besides driving the car and working on it and all that, I spent a lot of time talking back in the early 90s about climate change, about sustainability, about other options besides fossil fuels. And it really clicked with me at a young age. And as I went and experienced other things in life, I'm an avid surfer. I love nature, all these things. I started seeing how much what we're doing on this planet is not sustainable. When I moved back to Hawaii after some college, the first jobs I got there were on a lettuce farm growing food. And I was hooked. I just saw that growing plants and growing food was a way that I could make a difference, a way that a fundamental part of being a human. We all eat every single day. We're all eaters. And if we could change that fundamental relationship with process, if we could create a sustainable relationship with our food, then from that foundation, we could build a sustainable relationship with a lot of the rest of our life. So that really was the start for me. Of course, you can't make any money growing food. And at the time I was probably making less than minimum wage working growing lettuce. And I really liked smoking weed. So I started growing my own weed as kind of a supplementary career to growing food. And at that point I was dressing up in camouflage and tromping through the bush behind my house in Hawaii. And it was the foundation to me for the sustainable growing I end up doing now. That guerrilla style growing, like Johnny was saying, hiding plants in the bushes, growing an ounce or two at a time. I was building soil. You couldn't carry soil in. And I was creating fertilizer by collecting, in Hawaii, there's wild mango trees. So we'd collect up a bunch of mangoes near where our patch was and put them in a bucket and let them rot and then feed that to the plants and things like that. So I really, like, from the start with cannabis, had this relationship of using what you have to create what you need. And I think when we talk about sustainable and even that next step, regenerative, which is sustainable sustains what you have. Regenerative is trying to bring it back to what's possible. Regenerative is making it better than you started with. And the whole idea between sustainable and regenerative is getting out of an industrial model where cannabis is seen as a product, the same way a factory produces products, where you have inputs, you create a product, and then you have waste. the idea of sustainable and regenerative farming is that you don't have that linear stream that exploits resources and creates waste. You close those loops, so you use what you have to create fertility. You have your abundance, your product that comes out of that, and then the waste is cycled back around to create fertility, and that can be applied to all sorts of things. But as it applies to cannabis, that's the goal with sustainable and regenerative farming. And for us as a farm, it's also how we approach our vegetable farming. We do our cannabis and our vegetable farming no-till. That means we're letting the natural profile of the soil find its balance and building it up through an observation and replication of natural process, so that we naturally build resilience into the system based on the pattern natural resilience has, rather than trying to control the environment and submit it to our idea of how it should work.
Sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air right now just hearing you guys speak, because you bring so much rooted, no pun or pun intended maybe, rooted experience and passion and soul to this industry, where this the last week we hear a lot of business, and as Raju mentioned in his comment, he's been in 10 grows, all indoor. It's all about money and stress and waste. Whereas I think a lot of the root of the cannabis industry, especially in the Emerald Triangle, came from that passion of not just making money, but of tending to that plant, of growing a medicine. You know, I think there's some statistics that say that Emerald Triangle farmers, there was over 55,000 farmers that produce close to 60 to 70% of the weed in the US in an area the size of Rhode Island. And that's where you guys are based. And that's where I think a lot of us, I grew up in Philadelphia and Vermont. I was always waiting to get the, you know, in November, the harvest across the country, whoever was bringing it in. It was like those fine Cali outdoors. That's like really what we always wanted. So that being said, it went from this, you know, illicit industry into illegal, and there was a lot of in-between time. And both of you have, as small farmers, not really pushing just for bottom line growth, but for community growth, culture growth, and the sort of keeping the values alive of your region and your community. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what those transitions have been, Johnny, not just from you as someone who was actually incarcerated and then came to be a leading, you know, farmer who stands on a pedestal and talks about his experience. So there's a huge transition there, but from the challenges as a small farmer to survive and thrive within a legal market that doesn't necessarily support small businesses, small farms as much. Can you talk a little bit about what that journey has been for you and some of the challenges that you've had to overcome to maintain and thrive?
Yeah, sure. You know, starting from the earliest days when my parents were alive, it was always about this community and one another helping each other out. And, you know, there was a time just even recently when I took the blue sky for granted, and then all the smoke came in. And then when the blue sky came back, I just really just appreciated it, and I was grateful for it. I think there was a time when I was young that I took the community and my family and my friends a little bit for granted, because I always thought they would be there. And when I went away and I was removed from this community, and I saw that how this community, 100 people from this community showed up at court for me. This community, when my mom passed away and I was jailed, filled the mail room with letters and support. And when I returned home after 3,000 days of being gone, you know, there was 50 people here from this community after being away from that long that showed up here to help me get my life back in order. So for me, it's always been about this community. It's always been about friends and family, and it's been a very eye-opening awakening that they've always been here, and they're the ones that are supporting me through this. And your question was what? Sorry, I went off on a little tangent because it's so emotional and so distracting and it means so much. And you were asking me to tell you what?
Well, I think what you're saying, I mean, it's just, it's so real. And I think sometimes we get caught up in business.
You're right. And so I think, as a small farmer, we're all very fearful, or I should say I'm definitely fearful of big ag and what they can do. And just over the last year or two, I really have, that fear has actually subsided a bit, and I'm actually empowered by and awakened by what we're doing here and how powerful that has always been and really is to this day. And, I build a relationship with each and every single plant that I grow here on my farm. When I walk out the door with my cup of coffee at 5:30 in the morning and I look up the hill 100 yards away and I see one leaf wilting, I know that Sally or Zach or whatever name is on that plant, it might need some water, it might have some kind of issue. So it's just like having a relationship with your wife or your girlfriend, and she wakes up and she's not in the best of mood, or she's in a great mood. You build this relationship with each and every plant. And the more time and the more energy that you put into these different cultivars, the better they come out in the end. And we've wanted nothing over the last 40 years to share what we've been doing our whole life with these consumers and getting feedback saying, we appreciate you, we love your product, and we can taste and feel the difference in what you're providing us. And I get that through social media, and it's an amazing feeling. And it's not about the money for any of us. I promise you that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously your heart and soul and your life is in this. Daniel, maybe you can talk a little bit about challenges of being a small cultivator in a big marketplace, and what some of those challenges are that you're having to overcome, whether it be the size of the market or metric or taxes. Maybe talk about just some of those hurdles as a small cultivator right now in California that you're forced to deal with. Oh, you're on mute, Daniel.
Yeah, there we go. I think it's pretty ironic because I've been preparing. I have a county inspection coming up tomorrow, and I'm spent about 3 hours this morning updating metric, doing data entry. When it comes down to it, we are participating in a system which elevates capital and business above diversity and values other than money. There was a lot of hope early on that the cannabis industry would be something that went a different direction, but unfortunately it's not. Like all industry, many people are involved in this industry to make money, not because of the passion of providing medicine or growing in proper ways. So of course there's a challenge as a small cultivator to make your way in a game where the deck's constantly being stacked for large operations. The burden of bureaucracy, the burden of there's not an economy of scale as a small cultivator. So for us to be able to put the focus, to be able to put the value on the products we're creating, we naturally will make less money than folks who are streamlined, high output operations. The one positive thing about that is that I know there are people out there who value what we're doing, not only because it's better for the planet, but because the product we put out is better. You were talking a few minutes ago about how much you prefer sun-grown cannabis because of a connection that you have personally with us as farmers and with farmers in the Emerald Triangle. And I think as cannabis has moved into an industry, we've lost sight of one of the basic things that cannabis is, which is it is a psychoactive medicine that allows people to connect to something real. And I think cannabis, just like you talk about food, and people say you are what you eat, like, because literally you are what you eat. You're created out of that. When you talk about cannabis, the experience you have is the cannabis you smoke, and that cannabis is made of the raw elements that it is made of. And so to me, like, knowing that I'm putting out a product that will connect people back to winter rainwater and sunshine and the earth, and connect people back to something real, to a direct connection to real life, versus connecting people back to a diesel generator and some humming lights. I mean, that gives me a good feeling. And I know that no matter what, even if I'm not getting rich off of this, that I'm putting something out in the world that will allow people to feel better, and allow people to use this medicine for healing, and use this medicine for mind expanding experiences. Because when it comes down to it, that's what it's about. We're not really in my opinion, we're not really at a place, at a point in history, at a point in this planet where we have the privilege anymore to put profits ahead of other things. It's time to start putting our long-term survivability and the health and wellness of our fellow human beings at the forefront of our decisions and what we do in the world.
Amen to that. You always have a gift, Daniel, of expressing that message, and just being so authentic in why you do what you do, and what you put behind it. It never fails to give me the chills and remind me that I am human, and so much of the values that you hold, I really cherish. So thank you for that. Johnny, do you have any comments of that? Or you want me to pose another question? Because I'm also curious. Daniel is talking about obviously the passion for exceptional medicine and cultivation of a true plant, and I'm curious what separates. And maybe I know this too, but what separates the small scale farmers, the weeds that you guys are growing, versus other cannabis out there? You make a broad comment that you have the best weed, and the small scale and the nurture and the love that you put into it, and all the regenerative cycles that go through and into it make it the best. But why?
Well, the analogy that I like to use is, a small child that is put into private school and gets that individual attention every single day, really stands the chance of learning a lot better than a child that's put into a classroom with over 100 people. So, we as small farmers have the ability to touch and feel and give attention to each individual plant on a daily basis, whereas I think big ag really has a hard time doing that, or really doesn't have any need or want or necessity to do that. And for me, it's about touching the consumer. It's about getting that validation for what I've been doing for my whole life, the validation of the sacrifice of going to prison for 10 years for this plant. It really matters to me what other people think. And, it's about one another. It's about family. It's about community. It's about friends. It's about people we don't know. It matters to me what they think. And it matters to me that the product that I'm putting out, whether or not they respond to me or give me any feedback, it's a good product, and it will help whatever ailments they might be feeling or having. And just makes me feel good inside to produce something that I would consume myself. And, all the different strains, I think what makes some of us unique is all the different strains that I grow here on this property are strains that I have bred from a strain that my mom grew 45 years ago, and I do that in her honor. So the 5 or 6 different strains that I have here, nobody else in the world has. And so that's my gift to the consumer, and that's in honor of my mother. And that's what separates us from Big Ag, and that's what makes us unique and special.
Absolutely. Daniel, any comments there?
Yeah, I do have to say Johnny grows some of the finest weed I've ever smoked. So some good stuff there.
Bears are my favorite.
And I mean, similar to what Johnny was saying, I think diversity is one of the keys. And I think the strength and resilience that we have comes from diversity. And when you talk about these large agricultural operations that are pumping out the cookie cutter strain of the week or the year, of entirely clone based strains doing it exactly the same, and pushing towards satisfying a perceived market demand, you're lacking the potential diversity of this medicine. Everybody will find what strains work for them for different things, for different times in their life, for what they need. And I think there's a big value in more small farms growing, breeding, sharing more different strains with consumers, so that the consumers have access to a wide variety of medicine, as well as what Johnny was talking about. When as a farmer, you're able to give individual attention to a strain. When you're able to give individual attentions to your plants, you come out with a better product. And then another thing I think of a lot on this subject is these large operations necessarily put profit in the bottom line at the forefront. It is essential that they are efficient above all else, that they cut corners as far as costs to keep their production high. I'm not saying you don't have to be efficient as a small farmer, but if you're a small farmer living on your farm with the plants that you're growing, you're going to put other values ahead of the monetary values in business. You're going to put the beauty and health of your land. You're going to put the beauty and health of your plants and the joy that's taken in the process further ahead than somebody who's a business that's having workers grow clones in a facility would. And I think that relationship, that joy, and that process not only comes across in the product, but also comes across in the effect that the growing of that product has on the planet, on the community, on the workers, and on the business owners.
Yeah. Johnny, I don't know how well your internet is, but we can see some of the your plants behind you, and maybe we can just turn the camera around and show us.
Yeah, they're actually all okay.
Because
turning
what
the
Daniel
camera
said,
around.
the beauty and the care, I mean, it's just right behind you how evident that is, the heart and soul of what you do.
Yeah, most of these have already been harvested, Zach. But
Yeah.
every planter box has flowers in them. There's names of people and friends in my life that have made a positive impact on me and made it really possible for me to be here today. So it's a little bit more than just cannabis here. It's about honoring family and friends and people in my life that are special, and I want them to know that they're special. And I want the consumer to know that we care. And I think there was one piece of advice that I could give the consumer is to really know who your farmer is. And, it's not as hard as you think to Google one of us and really learn a lot about who's actually cultivating your cannabis. But a lot of us farms donate to the veterans. We give back to the community. We support nonprofits like the volunteer fire departments that I know Daniel's part of, and Sanctuary Forest that really protects the streams and the habitat around. So really know who your farmer is, and you'll be able to figure out whether or not they're producing good cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of volunteer firefighting and speaking of sustainability, I'm currently in Vermont, where I live in Sonoma County now, and really am a climate refugee fleeing from not being able to breathe for the last 2 months. And you guys had some close calls. I know Johnny, Tina, and Moon Made Farms are out hanging with you guys, and our whole community has been under a lot of stress the last 2 months. Curious about how smoke in California as an outdoor cultivator, how that's going to affect your crop. I mean, we have had 5 years of smoke, and what concerns besides us losing, our farms and our homes in terms of your crops? What are you guys thinking about during these shifting climate times where fire is a new, very serious reality for all of us?
Well, it's always hard on crops when there's no sunshine for a week at a time when they're trying to ripen. In addition, here, all of us had a period of time where it was basically snowing ashes, which took pretty consistent work to take the leaf blower and blow them off the plants and make sure they didn't settle on the buds. But I think all in all, the effects to the crops will be negligent. We were really lucky here. We weren't, the closest fire was about 20 miles away. So even though we experienced some bad air quality and some real smoky days, we were safe, and none of our crops burned down. And I don't think the quality of the finished product will be hurt. But it is really seeing these large climate change fueled fires is a good reminder of why we're doing what we're doing, and how much the care we have that we're putting into our farms has to expand to our properties as a whole, the forests surrounding us, and our communities, and do what we can to make our communities fire safe, support each other, and make the changes on a national and international level to actually start combating climate change.
Did we lose Zach? But hey, I saw you running around your.
That was on
I
mute.
saw you running. Oh, great. I just was going to say I saw Daniel running around on his farm through Instagram, getting fire hoses together, water tanks and this and that. And I think that's going to become a reality for many of the farms, is to really pick up our fire suppression game. Because it's like you said, it's a reality nowadays. It's something we're going to have to contend with every year.
And it's one aspect of sustainability is designing in systems that add fire resilience. I know Johnny and Rose over there have sheep now, and we have goats on our property. And one of the things that we're stacking functions with these livestock, where our goats roam around and keep the underbrush down all around our homestead, so that we are more fire safe, and at the same time they produce fertility for our farm and milk for our family and things like that. So a lot of it is adaptation, and one of the things that to bring it back to supporting small biodiverse farms is adaptation comes from more mind solving problems. We are all here, all us small farmers in the Emerald Triangle are here on the property we love, looking at solutions for our farms to be able to adapt to the changing environment. And I think that is a lot more powerful than a large business doing that. I think a lot of ideas come out of that. I think a lot of innovation comes out of that. And I'm really glad one of the biggest upsides of the legal cannabis market is that we're all out of the closet and we can all talk about the things we're doing on our farm to make it better with each other freely without having to check and see if our cell phones mics are on before we start talking about our weed.
Yeah. Yeah, fires have been real, and I think you said it right, both of you. It's just, the lifestyle that you lead right now, you two, and the product and the way you grow it is an example of the need for regenerative agriculture. These ideas need to be mimicked. And I don't know if anyone in our audience or you guys have watched that new documentary, Kiss the Ground, that just came up, but it re-emphasizes a lot of the issues of commercial farming, of tilling, of chemical fertilizers and additives, and the importance of carbon sequestration through regenerative ag, rebuilding topsoil, planting native grasses, composting. And on a small scale, these farmers in the Emerald Triangle have been doing that, if not by choice, by necessity, for generations and generations. We've had some really interesting conversations this past week on innovations in growing techniques, but they've been focused more, what I feel like, on the indoor environments. And you did mention some of the lessons you learned and innovations you had. I'm curious about if you could share one or two of your secrets of things you're excited with as it pertains to either creating your own nutrient-rich soil or water efficiency, both dealing with sort of being off the grid in California, how you are structuring sort of your grows or your year-round work to be more efficient in both of those, water efficiency and creating your own nutrient supply.
Well, I think water efficiency and creating your own nutrient supply go hand in hand. One of the biggest pieces in water efficiency is increasing the organic matter content of your soil. I haven't seen the documentary Kiss the Ground, but I do know that by increasing the organic matter content of your soil, you're able to create a more sponge-like action to the soil. Instead of water passing through it, it absorbs the winter rainwater. So even though we're experiencing droughts here and we're having these fires, we still get 60 to 80 inches of rain during the wet season here. And if we can create soils that are able to really recharge during that time, then we are more water efficient. We're able to hold some of that winter rainwater in the ground, in the soil itself, in addition to watering later in the season. And to me, one of the biggest leaps forward in technique that I've discovered in the last few years, I think 6 years ago or something, is doing no-till, and how to integrate cover cropping systems into no-till. So no-till is where you don't rototill the soil, you don't mix it up. You leave its natural layers intact and you add on top of it, similar to what the soils in a forest would be, where leaves get laid on top, twigs get laid on top, and you have a decomposition from the top down. The roots that are in the soil, instead of tearing them out year to year, you cut the plant off at the top and let those roots decompose deep within the soil. And then taking advantage of cover cropping, which the biggest engine for taking carbon out of the air and putting it into the soil, adding to soil organic matter, is photosynthesis. Plants literally take the energy from the sun and use it to pull carbon out of the air and create physical plant matter with it. So during the winter, when we're not growing cannabis through the off season, we can plant cover crops. We can plant crops in the same beds that utilize the winter sun and create biomass from it. And for us on our farm, what we do is we, when that cover crop becomes ripe at its maximum biomass potential, starting to flower, we crimp it down. We leave it rooted in the ground. We don't cut it. We take a board and we crimp it down so it's flat. We cover it with more compost and mulch and let it decompose in place. And what we're doing is creating a slow mushroom, like mycelial-based decomposition, which creates a higher percentage of stable organic matter in the soil than if you were to even grow a cover crop and rototill it into the soil, where it would rapidly decompose and release a lot of that carbon back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So that's a technique I'm really excited about for achieving that goal.
Cool. Look forward to hearing more about how that goes. Johnny, how about you?
Yeah, it's really hard, like I said, to follow Daniel and Taylor's practices because they're so extreme or so well used, and that came with a lifetime of experimenting. And so I'm constantly learning from him. We plant cover crops now. One of the most efficient different thing that we do here is over the wintertime we have rainwater catchment ponds, and like I said before, we water all the vegetables, all the flowers with the rainwater we catch in the wintertime. So none of the water that we're taking, that we're collecting or watering with, comes out of the spawning tributaries that lie right below this piece of property. And, if you could imagine, if there's 13 to 15,000 growers in the Emerald Triangle or in Humboldt County, maybe it is, and they're all taking a ½ an inch poly pipe of water out of every spring and every tributary, you can imagine how much water that is taking away from the fish during the summertime. So that is one of the biggest impacts that we've had on the headwaters of the Redwood Creek tributary, and one of the things we're most proud of. And solely because of that, we became the only fish-friendly cannabis farm in the state of California, sanctioned by the Land Institute of Napa Valley. So we're pretty proud of that thing. And one of the most important things that I think the consumer needs to educate themselves is about terpenes and about THC levels. Everybody's hyped up about high THC. There's an argument for that I won't get into now. But definitely, I think terpenes and cannabinoids are more important in, looking and seeking out a high THC content. So,
well, maybe you should talk about it now. It was going to be, one of my next questions was going to be about the sort of the consumer push right now for those high THC strains, and sort of some of the farmers who are more craft growing some of the lower THC strains. Daniel mentioned some of and both of you have actually mentioned about the biodiversity of the Emerald Triangle and the original genetics, Johnny, that you've been growing for 40 years, that have been passed down for generations, that are original strains. Someone explained to me not too long ago, and I think it was Ben from Insensia, said that the Emerald Triangle to cannabis is like the Amazon to medicine in terms of its genetic biodiversity. And to me, that changed my whole perspective on genetic biodiversity and growing weed, and the unknown as we get into researching the cannabinoid profiles and the terpene profiles, what they can do for medicine or growth or psychoactive compounds in the body. So maybe Johnny, Daniel, and that we've 5 minutes left or so, talk a little bit about your desire and your thoughts around cultivating for high or low THC, or the different terpenes within that as a source of medicine or intentionality of what you grow.
It's my belief, sorry, Daniel. It's my belief that eventually, once it's federally legal and there's more studies being done, that they're going to find that one of these cultivars that we're growing here in the Emerald Triangle might have a cure for cancer or autism or some kind of an ailment that maybe even COVID. But the biggest fear that I have in that the regulatory market is really forcing me to change the way I grow, because the more strains I have, the more testing I have. So if I have 15 or 20 strains here, it costs me $15,000 or $20,000 to test those strains. So what it's doing, it's limiting the amount of strains that I am growing here. Whereas I would prefer to grow 15 strains, I now grow 4 or 5 strains, because I'm trying to cut as many costs as I can just to survive this wave of big ag and this push for cheaper cannabis. Because it's my belief that even the 20% or lower THC cultivars that I grow here will make you feel far better for far longer than some of those high THC indoor products that people are experimenting around with. And so the best advice I can give is you have to experiment around with both products and really know for yourself, or figure out for yourself which of those products makes you feel better. And then you'll figure out why. So,
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, I harvested 2 strains for this summer with my summer harvest, and one of those strains tested at 31% THC, and the other one tested at 14% THC. And if I were to do a blind test, I don't think I could have told you which one was more potent. They both got me really stoned, and in different ways. So it is a discussion that has to take place. It's in the lack of education, it is the one metric consumers tend to look at is the number, and feel like if they're getting a higher amount of THC, then they're getting better value for the price. But that's not the case. Cannabis is more than just THC.
So we're getting down to just 2 or 3 minutes left, and I guess I guess I'll ask you. Both of you have dealt with the challenges, the transitions of the legal market. You've dealt with the challenges of climate change. You've overcome so much to get you here, and you've decided against almost all odds that you're going to continue to push through growing weed, where most people in your position would have thrown in the towel long ago. So in a world that's full of turmoil and challenges and uphill battles right now, you two remain to continue to push the boulder up the hill. And it's part of the reason I love you guys. And maybe you can just tell us why you've decided to do that for and with this plant, because it obviously isn't about the money right now. And maybe we'll just end on hearing that from both of you guys.
For me, Zach, it's really just something that I was born into, and that I have so much passion. I don't know. I'm still challenged by this plant every single day and every single year. I strive every year to breed different strains and come up with the best of the best. And so it's still challenging to me. It's still exciting to me. I still look forward to going to sleep so I can wake up in the morning and come out into the garden and to look at individual plants and to see how they're doing, and to try different growing techniques. So it's still exciting. It's a job that I really look forward to doing and that I love, and I really look forward to sharing it to the consumer. And really, it's out of my hands now whether I can continue doing this in the legal market, and it's really left into the hands of what I've been doing for my whole life to the consumer now.
Hopefully everyone heard that who's in attendance. Support your local sun-grown farmer. Daniel, what about you?
When it comes down to it, for me, what else are you going to do? Every time I've tried everything else, I always come back to this. And, I've taken a lot of paths in my life doing different things. And I find so much joy in being in service to both the natural world and the people that I'm providing food and medicine for. And I believe strongly in creating something, in making my way in the world, in making my living by using my own hands, using my own hard work to create out of the ground, out of the basic elements, something that wasn't there before, and makes the world a better place by doing it. And so every time I move away from that path, I come right back to it. And we all have to find something to do in life that makes us feel good, makes us feel like our toil, our work in the world is valued, and that we're contributing. And I feel that with growing cannabis and with growing food. I feel like I'm contributing to the world being a better place.
Yeah, beautiful, both of you. Thank you. Appreciate you both being on here. Why I value staying in this industry is through the relationships that I've developed with people like you two, and some of the other community we have in that grow community, and expanding as this cannabis industry expands. Finding the people whose heart and soul is really in it continues to motivate me as well to stay involved as not just a business or an entrepreneur or a marketer, but an ally and an activist in this whole thing. So both of you, miss you. It's great to see your face. Send your love, my love to Rose and to Taylor and to the 2-legged and 4-legged kids running around behind you. And to the attendees, thank you so much.